What if I told you that most countries today are not governed primarily by parliaments, presidents, or voters, but by contracts, not constitutions, not elections, not laws passed on the floor of Congress, but loan agreements written in boardrooms, signed under pressure, and enforced without a single citizen ever voting. Every year, governments debate taxes, social programs, and national priorities. Yet some of the most powerful decisions shaping education, healthcare, fuel prices, and even food subsidies are made outside the democratic process. So here's the mystery we're unraveling today. How did debt quietly transform from a financial tool to a system of governance? One that can override democratic choice without ever staging a coup. And, more importantly, why does this system keep repeating, even after it fails? Debt didn't always rule nations. For most of human history, power came from land, armies, or kings, claiming divine authority. Money existed, but it wasn't yet a mechanism to discipline entire populations. That changed slowly, then all at once. Behind the scenes, a new kind of power emerged. Credit power. Not the power to conquer territory, but the power to set conditions. Not do this or we invade, but do this or we stop lending. And that thread turned out to be far more effective. To understand how loans became laws, we need to go back, not to modern Wall Street or the IMF, but to the origins of sovereign debt itself. Because once governments began borrowing, the nature of power changed forever. First, governments didn't borrow the way modern states do. Early rulers raised money through taxation, tributes, or outright seizure. Borrowing was considered dangerous, even shameful, because it implied weakness. That changed in medieval Rome. As wars became larger and more expensive, kings needed upfront capital. Italian banking families, like the Medici, pioneered state lending. Monarchs promised future tax revenue in exchange for immediate cash. This was the first critical shift. Future citizens were being pledged to repay debts they never agreed to. At first, lenders had little enforcement power. If a king defaulted, lenders simply lost money. But Obertai enforcement evolved, not through armies, but through dependency. As states borrowed repeatedly, they became trapped in a cycle. Borrow to fight wars, tax to repay debt, borrow again to cover shortfalls. Debt stopped being an emergency tool. It became a permanent feature of governance. And once debt became permanent, conditions followed. The real transformation came in the 20th century. 2 world wars devastated economies and forced governments to borrow on an unprecedented scale. Out of this chaos emerged powerful financial institutions designed to stabilize the global system. The most important among them, the International Monetary Fund (IMF), the World Bank later, regional development banks, and private bond markets officially. These institutions existed to help countries recover, but their lending came with strings attached. These strings were called conditionalities. And conditionalities changed everything. A country didn't just receive money, it received instructions. Cut government spending, privatize state assets, remove subsidies, raise interest rates, liberalize trade. None of these policies were voted on by citizens, yet they reshaped everyday life. Debt had crossed a line. It was no longer financial assistance. It had become policy enforcement. Loans weren't just funding governments, they were governing them. The breaking point always looks the same. A country experiences crisis, war, recession, currency collapse, or a commodity shock. Revenues fall, foreign reserves dry up. Investors flee. At that moment, the government has only one option: borrow or collapse. Borrowing in crisis means accepting terms. This is where governance shifts hands. Because when a government can't pay salaries, import fuel, or service existing debt, lenders gain leverage, not through force, but through necessity. Budgets begin to reflect creditor priorities instead of voter priorities. Debt repayments are protected, social spending becomes flexible. Elections still happen, but choices narrow. Different politicians campaign on different promises, yet all must obey the same debt constraints. Democracy remains open. Governance moves to spreadsheets. Fallout is never just economic. Debt-driven policies are imposed. The effects cascade. Public services shrink. Inequality widens, unemployment rises, cost of living increases. But here's the deeper damage. Citizens begin to feel that voting changes nothing. No matter who wins, austerity continues. No matter who loses, debt obligations remain. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. Economic hardship gives political anger. Political anger gives instability. Higher borrowing costs. More debt. Debt governance doesn't just reshape economies. It reshapes political culture. Time and again, reforms are proposed. Debt restructuring, austerity with compassion, structural adjustment with safeguards. Yet the core mechanism never changes. Why? Because fixes usually treat debt as a technical problem, not a power problem. As long as debt contracts outrank democratic decisions, credit ratings punish public spending, capital can exit faster than voters can respond. Debt will remain a governing tool. Even relief programs often reinforce dependency. Old debt is replaced with new debt. Conditions evolve, but control remains. The system doesn't collapse because it fails. It survives because it disciplines. Today, global debt is higher than ever. Governments owe trillions, not just to public institutions, but to private investors, hedge funds, and asset managers. Entire national budgets are shaped around market confidence. Policies are judged less by public benefit or by how long markets react. The pattern repeats. Crisis, borrowing, conditions, austerity, unrest, more poverty. Debt doesn't need tanks. It doesn't need coups. It governs through interest rates, credit access, legal contracts, and most people never see it because it operates in technical language, far from public debate. Debt is not neutral. It is a system of power that can override democratic choice without abolishing democracy itself. When loans come with conditions, governance shifts from voters to creditors, even if elections continue. Debt crises are not accidents. They follow predictable patterns that reward lenders and strain societies. The real danger isn't borrowing. The danger is normalizing a world where economic survival depends on obedience, not consent. A world where laws are written in loan agreements. Citizens inherit obligations they never approved. If debt continues to replace democracy quietly, the question isn't whether governance will change. It's whether anyone will notice when it already has. If this video changed the way you see debt, governance, or power, share it. Because the first step to resisting invisible systems is making them visible. Subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden mechanics shaping our world. And ask yourself, before the next election, who really governs?